Mary stood outside the small roadside diner with her twin boys, Sam and Leo, holding their hands tightly as cold wind brushed past them. Christmas Eve had arrived, but it did not feel warm or joyful for Mary. The sky was dark, and snow rested on the ground like a quiet blanket, making the night feel even heavier. Mary looked down at the boys. They were 7 years old and shared the same soft brown eyes and gentle smiles. Their jackets were thin and slightly worn, but Mary had cleaned them carefully that morning so they would look nice. She wanted this night to feel special, even if she had almost nothing to give. Inside her coat pocket, Mary touched her wallet. She already knew what was inside, but she checked anyway. $20. That was all she had left after paying rent, buying bread, and keeping the lights on. She had counted it many times during the day, hoping the number would change. It never did. Sam looked up at her and asked if they were really eating out. Mary smiled and nodded. She told him that Christmas Eve was a special night and families should share a meal together. Leo squeezed her hand and said this was the best Christmas already. Mary felt a tight pain in her chest but kept smiling so the boys would not worry. The diner door opened, and warm air rushed out. The smell of soup, bread, and cooked food wrapped around them. The boys' eyes widened with excitement. Mary took a deep breath and guided them inside. The diner was small and simple. A tiny Christmas tree stood near the counter with handmade decorations. Soft music played quietly in the background. There were only a few customers, most of them tired travelers or locals escaping the cold. Mary chose a booth near the corner. She liked quiet places where people did not stare too much. She helped the boys sit and placed their gloves neatly beside them. Her hands were cold, but her heart felt warm seeing their smiles. The waitress came over with menus and water. She wished them a Merry Christmas with a kind voice. Mary thanked her and watched as she walked away. Mary opened the menu slowly. Her eyes moved carefully over the prices. She did the math again in her head. Water was free. One large meal could maybe be shared. Extra bread might help. She thought about saying she was not hungry. She thought about eating later at home, even though she knew there was little food left there. What mattered was the boys. They deserved at least one happy night. Sam and Leo studied the menu like it was a treasure map. They whispered to each other and laughed softly. Mary watched them and felt proud of how strong they were, even after everything they had faced this year. A year ago, life had been different. Mary had a small apartment, a steady job, and hope for the future. Then things changed slowly and painfully. Work hours were cut. Bills grew larger. Days became harder. Still, she never let the boys see her fear. The bell above the diner door rang loudly. The sound echoed through the room and made a few people turn their heads. A large man stepped inside. He wore heavy boots and a thick leather jacket. The emblem on his back caught everyone's attention. The room grew quiet for a moment. Some customers looked away. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The waitress paused before greeting him. Mary did not notice the man right away. She was still focused on the menu, choosing carefully, counting silently, planning every dollar. She finally closed the menu and signaled the waitress. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook slightly as she ordered one large plate and asked for extra bread. She added quickly that water was fine for drinks. The waitress nodded, understanding more than she said. She gave Mary a gentle smile and walked away. Sam leaned toward Mary and whispered that the diner felt warm and happy. Leo nodded and said it smelled like Christmas. Mary laughed softly and brushed their hair back. Across the room, the large man sat at the counter. He ordered coffee and spoke politely. His voice was low and steady, not loud or rough like some expected. As he waited, his eyes slowly moved around the diner. They stopped at the corner booth where Mary and the twins sat. He watched quietly. He noticed how Mary did not relax. He noticed how she kept her coat on. He noticed how she placed the breadbasket closer to the boys than to herself. The food arrived at the table. Mary thanked the waitress and immediately began breaking the bread. She placed the biggest pieces in front of Sam and Leo. She pushed the plate toward them and told them to eat while it was hot. The boys did not question her. They were used to her eating less. They ate slowly, enjoying every bite. Mary sipped her water and watched them with a soft smile. Her stomach ached, but her heart felt full seeing them happy. The man at the counter continued to watch. He said nothing. He finished his coffee and stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor caught Mary's attention. She looked up for the first time and froze. The large man was walking toward their table. Sam stopped chewing. Leo's hands tightened around his fork. Mary placed her hands gently on their shoulders, trying to stay calm as her heart began to race. The diner felt very quiet. All eyes followed the man as he moved closer. Mary took a deep breath and waited. The man stopped beside the table and did not speak right away. Mary felt her heartbeat grow louder in her ears as she looked up at him. He was tall and broad, with a calm face and tired eyes that had clearly seen many winters. Sam and Leo sat very still. They did not look scared, but they were unsure. Mary kept her hands on their shoulders, a quiet promise that she was there. The man finally spoke and asked if he could sit for a moment. His voice was low and respectful. There was no anger in it, no demand. Mary hesitated, then nodded. She believed in being polite, even when life felt uncertain. The man pulled out the chair slowly and sat across from them. He placed his gloves on the table and folded his hands together. For a moment, no one spoke. The diner seemed to pause around them. Spoons stopped clinking. Soft music continued to play, but quieter now, as if the room itself was listening. The man looked at Sam and Leo and smiled gently. He said they had good manners and strong eyes. He asked their names. Sam spoke first and said his name clearly. Leo followed, holding his brother's sleeve. The man nodded and repeated their names like they mattered. He then turned to Mary and asked if she was enjoying Christmas Eve. Mary answered honestly and said she was trying to make it special for her boys. The man nodded slowly. He said that was the most important thing a parent could do. Mary relaxed a little. Something about the way he spoke felt safe. The man shared that when he was young, Christmas had often been quiet and cold. He spoke about long nights and empty kitchens without going into details. He said he remembered his mother smiling even when she had nothing left to give. Mary felt her throat tighten. She understood that kind of strength too well. The man looked at the breadbasket and the shared plate. He did not point or question. He simply noticed. The waitress walked by and slowed her steps. She watched the table closely, ready to step in if needed. The man gave her a small nod, letting her know everything was fine. Sam finished his food and leaned back, satisfied. Leo wiped his hands carefully on a napkin and smiled at Mary. Mary smiled back, relief washing over her face. The man reached into his jacket pocket. Mary stiffened again, not knowing what to expect. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and placed it gently on the table. He said it was something he carried with him during the holidays. Mary unfolded the paper slowly. Inside was a short message written in simple words about kindness and warmth. There was no name signed at the bottom. Before Mary could speak, the man placed a small stack of bills next to the paper. The table felt suddenly too small for such a moment. Mary shook her head quickly and pushed the money back toward him. She said she could not take it. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from pride and surprise. The man raised his hand gently and asked her to listen. He said this was not charity. He said it was understanding. He explained that sometimes help arrived quietly, not to shame, but to lift. He said refusing kindness could hurt just as much as refusing hope. Mary's eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak, but the words would not come. Sam looked between them and asked if everything was okay. Mary nodded and pulled both boys close to her. The man stood up slowly. He said he did not want thanks. He said he only wanted them to enjoy their night. Other customers watched silently. Some nodded. Some wiped their eyes. The waitress approached the table and said softly that dessert would be on the house. She smiled at the boys and brought them warm treats they had not expected. Mary covered her mouth as emotion finally broke free. She thanked the man quietly, not with words, but with a look full of gratitude. The man nodded once and turned toward the counter. He paid his bill and added more than needed. He wished the waitress a peaceful night. As he walked toward the door, Sam stood up. He said thank you in a small but strong voice. The man stopped and looked back. He smiled at Sam and said those words mattered more than money. The bell rang as the door opened. Cold air rushed in briefly, then faded as the door closed behind him. The diner breathed again. Soft conversation returned. Warmth settled back into the room. Mary sat quietly, holding the folded paper in her hands. The boys finished dessert with joy shining in their faces. For the first time in a long while, Mary felt something shift inside her. The world still felt hard, but it no longer felt cruel. She looked at her sons and knew this night would stay with them forever. Christmas Eve had changed. And somewhere beyond the diner walls, kindness had already moved on to its next quiet moment. Mary remained seated for a long moment after the man left the diner. The folded paper rested in her hand like something fragile and important. Sam and Leo watched her face carefully, sensing that this night had become something more than just dinner. The waitress returned with fresh water and asked softly if they needed anything else. Mary shook her head and thanked her with a small smile. Her voice still felt tight, but warmth had settled inside her chest. Around them, the diner returned to its normal rhythm. Forks tapped against plates. Quiet conversations resumed. Outside, snow continued to fall in slow and steady flakes. Sam leaned toward Mary and asked who the man was. Mary thought for a moment before answering. She told him that sometimes people came into our lives to remind us that we were not alone. Leo asked if they would see him again. Mary smiled and said that even if they did not, his kindness would stay with them. The boys nodded, as if they understood more than their age suggested. Mary opened the folded paper again and read the message one more time. The words were simple, but they carried weight. They spoke of standing tall, even when the world pushed down. She placed the paper carefully back into her coat pocket. She knew she would keep it safe. The waitress returned with the bill and quietly told Mary that it had already been taken care of. Mary's eyes widened, and she felt another wave of emotion rise. She stood slowly, helping the boys put on their coats. The diner felt different now, warmer and kinder than when they had arrived. As they moved toward the door, several people smiled at them. One woman wished the boys a happy Christmas. Another placed a small wrapped treat into Leo's hand. Mary thanked them gently, unsure how to express what she felt. Outside, the cold air met them again, but it did not bite as sharply. Streetlights glowed softly, reflecting off the snow. The boys walked close to Mary as they headed toward the bus stop. They talked excitedly about dessert and the tree inside the diner. Mary listened, letting their joy guide her steps. At the bus stop, Mary checked her wallet again. The money rested inside, folded neatly. It felt heavy in a way that was not physical. She thought about groceries. She thought about warm breakfasts. She thought about shoes that fit better. The bus arrived with a low hum. They climbed aboard and found seats near the back. The bus was quiet, filled with tired faces and soft music from a small radio near the driver. Mary looked out the window as the city passed by slowly. She remembered other nights when she had sat alone, wondering how she would get through another week. Tonight felt different. Sam leaned against her arm and grew quiet. Leo rested his head on her shoulder. Mary wrapped her arms around them both and felt their steady breathing. She closed her eyes for a moment and allowed herself to breathe deeply. When they reached their stop, the bus driver wished them a safe night. Mary thanked him and stepped back into the cold with her boys. Their apartment building stood silent under the snow. The hallway lights flickered as they climbed the stairs. Inside, the apartment was small but clean. Mary turned on the lamp, and soft light filled the room. The boys placed their coats on the chair and sat at the small table. Mary removed the paper from her pocket and placed it on the table. She told the boys this note would stay with them as a reminder of what kindness looked like. Sam asked if they could help someone someday. Mary smiled and said yes, when the time was right. Leo asked if Christmas would always feel like this now. Mary paused, then answered honestly. She said life would still be hard sometimes, but hope could appear when least expected. The boys nodded and prepared for bed. Mary tucked them in carefully, pulling the blankets up to their chins. As she turned off the light, Sam thanked her for the dinner. Leo thanked her for being their mother. Mary stood in the doorway for a moment after they fell asleep. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from relief. She moved to the window and looked out at the quiet street. Snow covered the world in soft white. Mary pressed her hand against the glass and whispered a quiet promise to herself. She would keep going. She would remember this night. Somewhere out there, kindness had crossed paths with her family. And because of that, tomorrow no longer felt impossible. The night slowly deepened, holding their small apartment in gentle silence. Morning light entered the apartment slowly, touching the walls with a soft glow. Mary woke before the boys, as she often did. For a moment she lay still, listening to the quiet. The city outside felt calm, almost gentle. She sat up and remembered the diner, the folded paper, and the steady voice of the man. The memory brought warmth to her chest. Mary moved quietly so she would not wake Sam and Leo. She stepped into the small kitchen and opened the cabinet. It was not full, but it no longer felt empty. She placed the money on the table and planned carefully. Milk, eggs, bread. Something small but special for the boys. Later that morning, Mary and the twins walked to the nearby store. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the world clean and bright. Sam kicked at the soft piles along the sidewalk. Leo laughed when his boots left deep marks behind him. Inside the store, Mary chose items slowly. She felt different today. Not rich. Not free from worry. But steady. The boys carried small bags proudly. At the counter, the cashier wished them a happy holiday. Mary returned the smile and meant it. Back home, Mary cooked breakfast while the boys set the table. The smell of warm food filled the apartment. It felt like something new was beginning. As they ate, Sam asked again about the man from the diner. Leo listened closely, resting his chin on his hands. Mary told them that people were often more than they seemed. She said that sometimes kindness walked into a room quietly and left before anyone could ask its name. The boys thought about this carefully. Sam said he wanted to be like that someday. Leo nodded and said helping people felt better than getting things. Mary smiled and felt pride rise inside her. Later that day, Mary decided to walk the boys to the community center. They sometimes helped families there by sorting donated items. Mary wanted the boys to understand giving, even when times were hard. Inside the center, volunteers greeted them warmly. Mary helped fold clothes while the boys stacked boxes. The room was filled with soft voices and steady movement. One older woman noticed the boys working carefully. She praised them and handed them each a small treat. Mary thanked her, touched by the kindness. As the afternoon passed, Mary felt stronger. Helping others reminded her that she still had something to offer. When they returned home, the boys were tired but happy. They sat at the table drawing pictures. One picture showed a diner with a small tree. Another showed a tall figure standing near a family. Mary watched quietly. She did not correct them. She let the pictures be what they were. That evening, a knock sounded at the apartment door. Mary froze for a moment. She was not expecting anyone. She opened the door slowly. A neighbor stood there holding a small plate covered with foil. She said she had extra food and thought the boys might enjoy it. Mary thanked her with sincere gratitude. The neighbor smiled and said people should look out for each other. After dinner, Mary sat at the table and opened the folded paper again. She read the message carefully, every word sinking deeper. She realized something important. That night at the diner had not only changed one evening. It had changed how she saw herself. She was not invisible. She was not weak. She was a mother doing her best. Mary placed the paper inside a small book and set it on the shelf. She knew she would return to it on hard days. Later, as the boys prepared for bed, Sam asked if hard times ever ended. Mary thought carefully before answering. She said hard times did not always end quickly, but they could soften when hope entered. Leo asked if hope always came from strangers. Mary smiled and said sometimes it came from inside. She tucked the boys into bed and turned off the light. She stayed for a moment, watching them sleep peacefully. Mary returned to the window and looked out at the street below. The lights glowed softly. People passed by, each carrying their own story. Mary placed a hand on her chest and felt steady breathing. She knew challenges still waited ahead, but she also knew she could face them. Somewhere, kindness continued its quiet journey through the world. And because of one moment on Christmas Eve, Mary believed she could walk forward with courage. The night settled in gently, holding the apartment in calm silence. Mary rested, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The next morning arrived quietly, carrying a soft calm that Mary had not felt in a long time. Sunlight slipped through the thin curtains and rested on the walls like a gentle promise. Mary woke before the boys again, but this time she did not feel the usual weight on her chest. She sat at the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. Life was still uncertain, but something inside her had changed. She felt stronger, not because her problems were gone, but because she no longer felt alone in the world. Sam and Leo woke soon after, full of energy and excitement. They talked about their drawings from the night before and asked if they could go outside to play in the snow. Mary smiled and told them they could, after breakfast. She prepared a simple meal and watched as the boys laughed at the table. Their laughter filled the apartment, warming every corner. Mary realized that joy did not need expensive gifts or perfect days. It needed presence, care, and moments shared together. Later that morning, Mary walked the boys to a nearby park. Snow covered the ground, and the trees stood tall and quiet. The boys ran ahead, leaving uneven tracks behind them. Mary followed slowly, enjoying the fresh air and the sound of their laughter. A few parents stood nearby, watching their children play. Mary felt a small sense of belonging as she nodded politely to them. No one looked at her with judgment. She felt like part of the world again. Sam and Leo built a small snow shape and proudly showed it to her. Mary praised their effort and took a picture with her phone. She wanted to remember this feeling. As the afternoon passed, Mary noticed a man sitting on a bench across the park. He wore a simple coat and watched the children quietly. For a brief moment, she wondered if he reminded her of the man from the diner. Then she shook the thought away. Not every kindness needed to return in the same form. When it grew cold, Mary gathered the boys and headed home. On the way, they stopped by the community center again. A volunteer asked if Mary could help sort items for a short time. Mary agreed. While working, Mary met other parents facing similar struggles. They shared quiet conversations and small smiles. Mary realized she was not alone in her journey. Many people carried hidden battles. Before leaving, Mary noticed a young mother standing nervously near the entrance. The woman held a small child and looked unsure of herself. Mary remembered how she had felt not long ago. Without thinking too much, Mary walked over and offered help. She explained how the center worked and stayed beside the woman until she felt comfortable. The woman smiled with relief and thanked her. In that moment, Mary understood something important. Kindness had not stopped at the diner. It had continued through her actions. Back at home, the boys settled down with books and drawings. Mary placed the folded paper back on the shelf and looked at it for a long moment. She knew she would never forget the night it came into her life. As evening approached, Mary prepared dinner. The boys helped set the table. Their movements were calm and confident. During the meal, Sam said he wanted to help people when he grew older. Leo said he wanted to make sure no one felt lonely. Mary listened with pride shining in her eyes. After dinner, Mary tucked the boys into bed. She kissed their foreheads and whispered that she loved them. They fell asleep quickly, peaceful and safe. Mary sat alone for a while, reflecting on the past few days. She thought about struggle, kindness, and quiet strength. She realized that even the smallest moment could change a path. She moved to the window and looked out at the city lights. Each light belonged to someone with a story, a hope, or a dream. Mary placed her hand over her heart and made a quiet promise. She would keep going. She would keep helping when she could. She would keep believing that goodness still existed in unexpected places. Somewhere out there, a man in a leather jacket continued his own journey. He might never know how deeply his actions had reached, but their impact lived on in a small apartment filled with warmth and hope. Christmas had passed, but its meaning remained. It lived in shared meals. It lived in open hands. It lived in courage found during hard times. As Mary turned off the light and prepared to rest, she felt peace settle over her. The future was still unknown, but it no longer felt frightening. Because once, on a cold Christmas Eve, kindness walked into a small diner. And because of that, a mother and her twins learned that hope could begin with one quiet moment.